Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Arc Development with Components Part 1. There will be 3 parts for this introduction to web components. Today we have on the stage Julie Powell. She's our product manager for ArcGIS Map SDK and many other things. Julie. And Yann Cabon, that is a Map SDK dev lead. With us to present this first session. And personally, I'm Fred Aubry, and I'm the web component
dev lead.
Okay, so
welcome. It's going to make sure that we are not saying anything wrong.
Big brother.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm also Jann's emotional support guy. So let's start with Julie. Let's go.
Okay, thank you, Fred. And apologies for not having a great accent, like both of my friends and colleagues have the beautiful French accent going. Okay, I wanted to start the presentation just by kind of putting everything we're doing with components into context. It's really about the evolution of the browser. And as technologies, standards, capabilities in the browser advance, our SDK is advancing with it as soon as there's broad adoption across browsers. And components is just one example of that. Many things in the SDK that you probably already are aware of, already using many different things in the browser, and it's always, updating and evolving as soon as it's available. The first introduction of web components that we released was Calcite, that many of you are already using. This started out as Esri's own design system that then we made public so that you could use it in your own applications for building consistent, user-friendly, accessible applications. And you'll see us use it throughout this presentation and most, if not all, of the tech sessions that you'll see at the conference. Okay, so all about components. I felt like the best way to start this is to really just look at a very basic app. This is doing a shadow analysis. It's got a little base map toggle. And really the code you need to create an app like this is simply using that simple ArcGIS scene. It's adding the shadow cast component and expand and then base map gallery. So it's really kind of simplifying the way that you do web development using the common patterns that you've done before. If you can add a button to your application, then you can add a map to your application just as simply. In comparison, this is the code you would have written to do the same application previously. So you can kind of see that kind of simplification of code when you move to components. So just a high-level summary. First of all, this is not something that Esri invented. This is a collection of W3C standards that we're basing this off of. And really, the big picture is that it's maximizing productivity for front-end web development. That is the most important aspect. And part of that's because you have seamless framework integration. It's framework agnostic, so whatever tools you like to use, you can just easily use them with components. And also, as I mentioned, is a standard way to embed custom functionality. We actually are doing all of our own internal development now as building web components in our own ArcGIS apps and experiences through ArcGIS Online. And that allows us to basically encapsulate workflows and functionality into components shared across apps. You have that consistent experience. And as the last bullet points out, over time, we're going to be releasing more of this encapsulated functionality as part of the JavaScript Maps SDK. So there's more things that we're able to share with you in a standardized way that you can bring into your applications without having to do your own custom development to achieve that. Okay, so now I'm going to start with my demo. This session's very demo heavy. And you have to be really nice to me because I'm going to be really brave and do a bunch of live coding for you. So you could also look for bugs and we can do some live debugging if that happens. But let's start real quick in the SDK. I just wanted to give you a really quick tour. If you haven't seen the components before, really good place to start. It's just right here, overview, explains the different packages we have today. The most recent update, you can see in references, we have it integrated the component reference alongside the core API reference. You can search for something like map, and it will come up with the ArcGIS map and the core API version of it too. So you can find things that way. So let's just go ahead and look at something here. Let's see, let's look at elevation profile. This is one of our components you've probably seen before, probably in the past as a widget. Something's funny about my screen, but this basically is showing you a live preview of what the component looks like when you change different, let me see if I can change the zoom. Oh, there we go. You can see it a little bit better. So as I change different, the configuration of different attributes here, you can see it moving. So for example, the top right, it'll change the location, or bottom left. And each component exposes a different set of configuration options. Once I have it the way I like it, I can look at the code, and then this tells me, what I would need to do to bring that into my application, what that code looks like for that configuration. So let me go back to the controls, and I'm going to actually use the elevation profile in my first demo. And I'll position it at the bottom left. I'm going to hide the clear button. I'm going to hide the legend. I can basically just decide, what things I want to display as visible elements in the elevation profile. I can also decide what units I want to display. This is maybe something that Jan and I might fight over. I'm going to do imperial. He's probably going to show metric in his case. But there we go. So I have it just the way I want it. Whoa, sorry about the scrolling. And I can copy this and then put it into my application. So let's go to the code. This is a very simple application. Basically, it has nothing in it except for I'm referencing the JavaScript SDK style sheet, the core API, and here, this is the main difference here. You can see it has the components referenced. So what I'm going to do is, actually, I meant to copy this whole thing and put that into my application. And actually, I want this to be a map rather than a scene, so I'll change that. I'm also going to change to a web map, and this is the web map I want to use, so I'm referencing the item ID. And I'm almost done. What I need to do, since this is a 2D application, elevation profile needs elevation information. So what I can do is specify the ground, and I'll say world elevation, and then save it. So you can see it's brought over the position, it's hiding the different parts I don't want to display, and then I've specified the units. Notice that it is placed inside of the map, and so when I go to my application, I'll refresh it, and then now I should see it here in the bottom left, and I'll just go to, these are national park trails, by the way. I'll just pick any line, and then we'll see the elevation profile show. Wow, that's quite a hike, isn't it? Show it displayed. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is use Calcite to create a UI around the map. So first, let's just have a quick look at Calcite. As I mentioned, this is the design system we use for our own applications. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. Probably the most common place you'll be going is the component section, where you have layout controls, you have input controls, all kinds of different web components you need to put together your application. I can go into any of these, and in a similar way that we saw with the map components, it has like a WYSIWYG, configuration of the components that I can change, and then see the code for how I put it into my application. So let's go to my next step. So this one, it's just basically an empty Calcite shell. So I'll show you what it looks like today. Or right now, it just has a navigation bar. You have a little name and logo here, and it has an empty space. This is the default slot for where I'm going to put my map. So here you can see that reflected here. I just have this panel, which is my map container. You have the Calcite navigation, which is the whole little header going on. And then here's where I have that same code that you saw earlier with the ArcGIS map. So if I go ahead and add that and refresh, now we should see that same map and then the elevation profile. So it looks kind of funny because what I did here, this panel down below, my intention is actually to put the elevation profile outside of the map and have it in like a separate section. So I'm going to go back and do that. You don't always have to put things on top of the map. So I'll go ahead and move the elevation profile to put it inside the calcite panel. Let's give it a name. Let's call it, how about elevation profile? Not too creative. Let's see. So when you have a component that's outside of the map, you have to give it a reference to the map so it knows how to interact with it and get its data. So the way you do that is do reference element, and then I have the ID is map, and then now the elevation profile, even though it's outside of the map, it still has access to everything it needs inside of the map. So I'll refresh it, and now it's going to load down here, and then you got some trails. We'll go ahead and test it out. Just select any line, and it's thinking. There we go. This app really makes me want to go figure out where these trails are and see it. Okay, so let's do some more things. So one nice thing about elevation profile is, it's doing all this like statistical calculation, and you can actually go in and access those statistics and then display it and use it in other parts of your application. So what I would like to do is display statistics about the hike in these little calcite chips right here. So I'm going to show you how I might do something like that. So let's go to step 3, and here I've added the calcite chip group. So I'm going to display the walking distance and the elevation gain in each hike. So now that I'm using some of that core JavaScript API to be able to pull out the statistics from that component, I need to actually use JavaScript down here to get the element. This should look like a familiar coding pattern. I'm just using a query selector or get element by ID to get the elements. And then I'm basically listening to the ArcGIS ready event on the elevation profile. This is the event that fires that tells me, okay, this component is ready for me to interact with it. I can do something with it now. So now inside my code, I'm going to get the profiles from the elevation profile. And then this is a really important event to be listening to, the ArcGIS property change. So all the components have this this event on it, so that if I want to listen for when a particular property changes and do something with it, I can listen to that event, find out, okay, which property changed. I'm interested in progress, because basically when progress goes from 0 to 1, that tells me that the elevation profile has been calculated. So I'm checking, okay, is progress the property that was updated, and is it 1? And then basically I just pull out the statistics, and then I set the inner text on those elements. So let me refresh this, and then if we go look at let's see. I also take requests if you guys want to look at a particular trail. I'll select a line, and then right here, if my code is working correctly, that's a 16-mile trail and about 1,500 foot elevation gain. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I'm kind of getting tired of zooming in to different locations. So what if I just want to search for a trail? One wonderful feature about the search component is that you can, of course, use it with the world geocoder or any geocoder that you want to use, but you can also use it with the layers in your map. And that's really handy, because if I search for something like the word happy, can you think of like all the different things that might come up with a world geocoder? But I want to look for Happy Isles Trail that's specific to my data set. So it really improves the user experience if you configure your search component to use a layer. So I'm going to go to our step 4, and I'm going to go ahead and add the search component. I'm going to put it in the top nav. So it's ArcGIS search. And then I need to do something. Oh yeah, give it a slot so it knows where to put it. Slots are nice. If you guys haven't heard of slots before, if you're new to programming with web components, slots are like placeholders. So basically, when we design the components, we say, okay, you have like a default place where you put content if you don't specify a slot. Or we have a place where you can put things in a particular part of the navigation bar. So there's predefined placeholders where I can decide where I want to put content or embed my own components. And this
maybe show on the Cal site where to find what the available
that's a really good suggestion. Okay, so back on Cal site, here we have the card. That's a really good point. So this little square thing, this tells you where the slots are on each, on each individual component. So the heading in the card is there, you have footer start. It'll basically tell you where each one of those things are, and you can like turn it on and off. So it'll explain where the slots are. So today, slots are only available with CalSite components, but eventually that'll be something that we'll be doing in the map components and other components in the JavaScript SDK. You'll hear more about that from Fred in the road ahead. Okay, so let's see, where was I? So my slot is going to be content end. And because the search component is outside of the map, again, we have to do reference element. And it's the map. Okay, so now let's have a look at that. So that was step 4. And now you see it up here, and so I'll search for Happy Isles, and you can see I've got the Happy Lake Trail. These are all here's Happy Isles Loop Road. That's a really great hike, by the way. Okay, so there we have it, and trust me, that would have been way harder to find if I was just using a world geocoder. Okay, so the next thing I want to add to my application, notice the pop-up. Let's kind of dissect what we've got here. Notice we have a docking button. I've got some like default actions, the zoom to. Many different parts of the pop-up are configurable for if I want it displayed or not, the visible elements. Also, whether the pop-up is positioned over the feature or by default, or if by default it's docked. So I have full control over that in the pop-up. So in my application, I have some preferences. And so what I'm going to do in my case is, so I'm getting the ArcGIS map component, and I'm listening for the ArcGIS view ready change. Jan is going to talk about that particular event later on. But the main thing I wanted to point out is that I'm getting the pop-up from the map element. I'm telling it that by default, I want the docking to display. That's what these properties are doing. And then I'm also saying, hey, I don't want that action bar, the zoom thing. I just want to simplify my pop-up. So let's go to step 5 and see what that looks like. Another trail I like is Mirror Lake. Mirror Lake Loop. So now it's zooming in, and then the pop-up you see automatically shows up docked. It doesn't have that extra bar for zoom to, and there's other visible elements I could choose to not display if I'd like. All right, so the final thing I want to do is give it a little bit of a style. So going back to CalSite, this is another, first maybe let me show you where you can learn about design tokens. So the way that we theme components is using design tokens with CalSite. So let me just show you what that looks like. Basically, it specifies the different names of these different CSS variables and what they relate to. And you can use these to style CalSite, and you can use it to style the map components as well, because they're built with CalSite. Now, the asterisk on that statement is that some of our components are still moving over to be fully based on CalSite components. So you could see some variation within the components of the CalSite styles being applied to them. But the eventual destination of all components is to be fully CalSite components based. Okay, so going back to that first tab, it's kind of fun, I mean, I think, to go and play around with the themes. So down here you have this little cogwheel where you can change like the theme from dark to light. Then you have like the different branding colors, like change it to gray or whatever. So you can go through and change different CSS variables to change the theme of your application. And then once you like it, you can look at the CSS, and then it'll tell you what you need to do to apply that to your application. Okay, so back to my app here. This one's setting a custom theme. Down here, I just have some basic colors that I've set in my app, and then I've applied that to the body. And if we go to my last step, you'll see that it's being applied to the heading and the profile. Then if I type in Mirror Lake loop, you can see that many different parts of this search widget applies the branding. So I survived and there was no bugs, so pat on my back. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jan. Oh, thank you. I kind of begged for that, didn't I? Okay, so that's the end of the demo. Let's just do a quick wrap up of what you guys saw. Okay, so the most basic aspects of what I showed, positioning components. You have a position attribute on the components, which says where in the map you want to place it. There's also a manual option if you want to completely just decide, an absolute positioning or whatever of your component. If you're placing something that's not a map component, you can use ArcGIS placement, and that will place it, basically have the map component manage the placement of your component, even if it's not a map component. And then another reminder, if you're placing something outside of the map, you need to use reference element. You'll know very quickly if you've forgotten that, because basically it won't work. You won't see it tied to the map. In my demo, I showed how you can watch for changes. So all of the components have events that essentially there's custom events that are corresponding to user interaction. There's other events that have to do with state. And then if you want to watch for properties, again, you'll want to use that ArcGIS property change event and specify the property that you're interested in and whatever value you're looking for, or whatever logic you're wanting to do. What I showed in the search component, one thing I didn't actually demo is the way that you can configure what shows up in the search component. One of the ways is basically in your organizational settings, you have the ability to control which locators show up. So that only works if you've signed in to your org. Actually, I'm not sure if that's true. That might be wrong. So let's just say it's part of your org settings, and I need to double check if that statement's right, whether you need to be signed in or not. But for sure, the next bullet, and that's what I did, I can save search sources to the web map. So this actually saves it to the web map. And you can see that I added the trails to the web map, and that's what enabled me to do that nice search experience in my app. And then, of course, you can do everything in JavaScript by configuring the sources property on the search component.
Yeah, these options are in the settings tab of your web map, right? So if you open the web map.
Yeah. And then you'll
of the layer, right? So if you are using a feature layer, so this feature layer, particularly if you go into the settings tab, this is where you can.
Yeah, but that also applies to web map. This one's on the web map. Yeah, I think it both work though. Okay, and then the pop-up. What do I want to say? Oh yeah, I got it from the map element. You can configure the visible elements. I added that to this demo because I do get a lot of questions about that. Sometimes people want a really simple pop-up with just the text, and that's it, and maybe a close button. So you can configure that. And then I used the dock options to control the pop-up placement. And again, we used Calcite Design System. I only talked about the web components, but you also have a gigantic icons library that you can use throughout your UI. There's also all the Calcite icons also apply to. There's a mapping set of icons. There's branding and color schemes that you can use. There's a Figma UI kit, so if you are working with a designer, they can work within the tools they're familiar with. And then there's a one-to-one correspondence between what you design in Figma and then the components you can use to build your application. And then there's design guidelines. Okay, now for the best part of our tech session, let's go to Jan's beautiful demo.
Yeah, so I'm not as brave as Julie. I won't do any live coding, but for this session, I was like, I wanted to see how far I could go building an app with just HTML and JavaScript, and see like give you some tips and tricks working with the components. And so I built this app on top of that same web map. So we're gonna do a tour of it first. This is a Trail Explorer app. And what I wanted to do on top of Julie's app was to do more filtering to help me search through these trails. And then, when I select a trail, I want to automatically have the elevation profile without having to interact with the elevation profile component so much. So we have a map, and then on the left side, we have a trail filter panel. And then we have the ArcGIS feature table here, the elevation profile here, and then the same search that Julie showed before. And so what we can do is, for example, select one of the trail categories that I'm interested in, like hiking, and then we can use the Kyle site list to filter here the Yosemite, for example, and then automatically it would zoom to the selected park, and then when you select a park, we filter the selection of the trails that are available, and then finally we can select one like the John Muir Trail, and then automatically it opens the pop-up for that trail, and then populates the elevation profile, and does the calculation in metric system that Julie showed before. So, okay, so. This is the app, and let's discuss a little bit how we could build it. So we have the filter here that filters the map. It applies. Sorry, I didn't show that, but it applies a filter if I select, let's say, biking. It uses a feature filter to hide the trails that do not apply. Then it also filters the data in that feature table. Then we have the parks list that filters also the data displayed by the table, but also updates the Kyle site ships here to only to list that the number of trails corresponding for each category. Then we have the table. The table updates highlights the trail that is selected, configure the elevation profile, and also opens the pop-up. And then finally, we have the search that also updates the selected trail, the elevation profile trail, and also the pop-up. So, and finally, yes, the pop-up, if I were to interact with a feature, it would automatically select the feature I clicked on. So same, the pop-up, when we select a new feature, it would also interact with the elevation profile. Yeah, the 4-mile trail is an awesome hike, it's just very steep. All right, so if I were to code all of this, like feature by feature, I will end up with all of these interactions to code. And then and I mean, this is exactly what I did. It was a big plate of spaghetti code. So, and I realized that I could really not show that code. And to organize this, I decided to create some state management, right? So we have all our features there on the right, the park filter, elevation profile, the map, the table, the categories filter, the pop-up, and the search. And so I created this application state manager. I mean, this is my take on it, right? Feel free to judge what I'm doing here. But this is an application state manager that will provide information about the trail categories that exist, which is fetched from the data, the parks, the list of parks coming from my feature layer, and then. We provide also information about what is selected by the users, the categories that were selected, the park that was selected, the trail that was selected, and then functions to modify that state. So the select park, select trail categories, and select trail. So components, like Julie showed that the components, they emit events. So park filter will emit events, the Kyle site list will emit events, the table emits events. And so what we're going to do is wire those events to modify the application state, right? So we add some event listeners. We'll go over the code after, right? But I explain like the logic. And then when each of these components emits events, the listener will call this function, select park, select trail categories, and select trail. In return, the application state manager also emits events. So it emits the filter change event when the trail categories or the selected park changes, but also a selected trail change when a user selects a particular trail via the table or the pop-up, for example. And so in return, it's the same. We have an event listeners on each of these events that will modify each individual component. So it's a two-way system, but it's organized so that it doesn't go in all the directions at the same time. Okay, so let's go over the code now of this app. So first, so there will be a lot of things that also like Julie already exposed, but I will go over them again, adding the different script tags from the CDN, the calcite components, the ArcGIS Maps components, the SDK, the core API, and then also I'm adding like my own styling. And then my app is slightly organized differently. We have the calcite shell, like Julie used with the calcite navigation and the ArcGIS search. I disabled a little bit more stuff on it, like the location, like for example, that lets you reverse geocode your current location. Then I used in the container, I have a flat list of all my components, the map, the table, which I configured with only one selection allowed at the same time. And then at the bottom, I have a panel with the elevation and the elevation profile. And then we have on the left side, we're gonna have our filter panel. So the filter panel uses a calcite ship group to have those little clickable category buttons. And then the park list, which is gonna be a calcite list. And then all of these properties, I did the same as Julie. I went on the calcite list. And then the demo here has lots of different samples. But so I was interested into filtering so that I could filter, like Julie showed before. And then in terms of the properties, I was interested into selection. So this is what I use, selection single persist, which allows you to only be able to select one at a time. The single one is also one that you can toggle, but I didn't want that. What else? Yeah, so I configured a bunch of these properties, and then in the end, I can just copy the code snippet or just access it here. So super practical, without having to go over the doc, which is also great, but like super handy. And then finally, I load my application module. So for the styling here, I'm using a CSS grid. You can see that the content is organized in a grid system. And for that same, I went on Google, give me a grid, a CSS grid generator. It's great. You can configure the number of columns and rows. And this is what I did. And then after you can create your areas like this. And then this is what I wanted. Something like this, And then I copy-pasted basically this content, which gives me the configuration of my grid. And here we have like the different divs. So one will be our filter panel and so on. So yeah, this is the result of that. So like that, the components are placed using that grid system. Now on the code, if we go back here, the module, so my main application code is using a type module. So it's a ES module. It's not just like regular. It's a module, a JavaScript module. So what it allows me to do is to use import statements to import code, because of course when I wrote this code, I ended up with like 500 or 600 lines of code, and I really wanted to clean it up so that we don't have to deal visually with a lot of different utilities. So I isolated my utilities into different things, so different modules here. So we have like, for example, little function to concatenate different SQL conditions into a single where clause. Here I have a function to update the DOM elements. We have a module parks to fetch the different parks. So I use the feature layer. I create a query, and then I group by the park name, which is called unit name, and then I ask for some statistics. So the number of trails for that park. I want the total length of combined length of that for that park, and then also the aggregate of this of all these trails. Then I call query features, sort the features, and then I return some objects. So, and then I have another one for trail categories. I won't enter into details, but this is pretty much doing similar things, like doing some queries. Then in my main module, I can just import them using this. And then so the way to import JavaScript modules, you can, from the SDK, you can use the regular require that we show, but we are releasing this new utility that is placed directly in the global called $ArcGIS, and there is a function on it called $ArcGIS import, which returns a promise with the modules that you want to import from the SDK. So this is really great because like that you don't have to use the require syntax, the AMD syntax that we have been using so far. It's very, very convenient to use a promise based. You could also import the modules from the SDK. We also expose them as ESM modules directly on the CDN, but it's not optimized. It's better to use the AMD module. So this way, it's optimized. So I'm importing just the web app and the reactivities. These are the two modules that I need for my app. So then next I grab the DOM elements using the query selector, and then I create my state manager, right? So for doing this, I create a JavaScript class, and I extend event target because the state manager emits events, and then what this class will do, this instance, is create the web map by ID, and then declare the variables that we wanted, the trail categories, the parks, the selected properties, and so on. And then we have a load function. That load function will really kick off the loading of the different data set that we need for our application. And so here, yes, so here I directly have access to the map because I created it. Julie showed you a different pattern where she put the item ID directly in the HTML, which is completely valid. It's just that for me, for my needs, I prefer to directly create the web map. And then that web map we'll see later is being set on the map element. So alternatively, so if I use Julie's pattern, which was to put the item ID in the DOM, I can access the map when the ArcGIS view ready change is fired. When this event is fired, then I can access directly the map on the map element. Then I grab my layer from the list of layers of in my map, and then I start by fetching the list of parks and the list of categories, trail categories. And then that's it. Then our function, our state is initialized, and then we expose the different function to select a park, select trails, and then every time we select, we dispatch the event called filter change. And then when select trail is called, I do some, sometimes the feature has the geometry of the trail, sometimes it doesn't. So I fetch the geometry, and then I store it as my selected trail, and again, I emit the event, so like that, my consumers, my listeners, they can grab and update the app. Yep, so let's go. Then our state is instantiated, and then I will assign the map on my map element. Like you would assign the map on the map view, you can do that on the map element. And then, so I load my state, so like that I have my entire data on the client. And then I will set up my UI, so I will set up my filter panel and so on. So filter panel will update the list of parks, so it will populate, that function populates the list of the parks, and then we update the trail categories with the different, that will create the different ships for each category. Once we have rendered this, we want to listen for events coming from those components. So the park list, the cal site list emits a cal site list change event. And then when the user selects one of the park, I will grab that park, and then I will just tell the state, okay, select that park. Same from the trail categories. When the cal site ship group select event is emitted by the component, then I can call select trail categories on my state. This is all the wiring that we have to do, and it's like super clean. And same for the table. The wiring of the table is to set the feature layer that the feature table will visualize. And then we are listening for the ArcGIS cell click event that when user click on one of these rows and then select the trail. Elevation profile, the setup here is to listen to the ArcGIS property change that Julie showed. And then for the pop-up, in this case, I'm going to watch for the property. So the pop-up is not yet a web component, but so right now I will watch the properties like I would do with the core API, watch for the selected feature. When a pop-up will be a component, there will be an event for it, probably, and then we select the trail. And finally, the search, same as Julie showed. When the ArcGIS select the result, so when the user validates a search, then we grab the result, which contains the feature, the trail that we selected, and then we call select trail. So this is all the components modifying our state. And now we want to listen to the events coming from the state manager. And so we listen for the filter change event. And in this case, I will just update the trail categories to compute the number of trails for that particular park. And then I construct a where clause that will make sure that we filter all the trails that are being selected, like so the trails for the categories that were selected and for the park that was selected. And I set a feature effect to blur the features that are not matching those criteria. And then finally, I need to update my table with the object IDs that that the table will show. So I will query for the object IDs that match the park and the trail categories, and update the table with that. And finally, when the park is selected, I will navigate to the selected park extent. The final event that we have to wire is selected trail change. When a user selects one of the trail, I grab the selected trail, and then I configure my elevation profile with that trail. I will highlight the trail in the table, and then I will navigate to that trail and open the pop-up. Sorry. Yes. So these are just the functions like to update the DOM, so update the park list, and then update the trail categories, chip scope. And that's it. Like the app is complete. And so I think these are my takeaways on building this app. I think to access the web map, you can do that, like I said, by creating the web map directly in JavaScript, which was more convenient for me. And then otherwise you can listen for the ArcGIS view ready change, and then grab the map from the map element. I think when you work with JavaScript like this, we really like separate the concerns and responsibilities, like where is your business logic, where is your state, and separate that from the UI updates. And you can do that using events, right? Components emits events, modify the state, states emits events, modify the components. And then, of course, I've been working with TypeScript like for so many years. I use very little JavaScript these days. So really using JavaScript requires a lot of discipline. And I think, using TypeScript can help making sure that your app is type safe, but also it helps also on refactoring the code. If you rename a property, you don't have to search for the property used in all the files. So So yeah, so my advice would be to use TypeScript. And then, so you can follow this kind of recommendation. You can, but if you need more structures and more guidance building apps, you can look also into using frameworks, because they usually come with good best practices that lets you that guides you into the state management of complex applications. Yeah, Julie?
Okay, just a couple words on some of the other packages that are part of the JavaScript SDK. You also have access to charts components. These are the components, the charts that you'll see throughout several other ArcGIS apps. This is an example of one of those, as I was describing, us encapsulating functionality that we use in our own applications in ArcGIS and making that available through the SDK. So charts is a great example of that. You can author them as part of the web map or a layer, and then it can be loaded in your application using the chart component. It's could actually be saved that way. Or you can create it directly in code using the chart model. There's many great third-party libraries for doing charting. I think what's the most special about these charting components is that you basically can use the WebGIS to author them, to save them as part of your web map, just comes through, or your layer item comes through that you can easily load in your application. They're also highly optimized to work with feature services and other ArcGIS services, so it has many aspects that kind of have that server-client optimization that you can benefit from. We also have embeddable components. Today, that's just the map component. You might have seen in Map Viewer, one of the options to share it is embed. That's using this JavaScript SDK embed map component. This is a good one to use if you don't really need any customization. You just want to turn on, a couple tools, on or off, have your title, and you're done. If you want to do any kind of customization, then you go to the map components. This is just one option when you just want something quick and you want to embed it into your page. And then finally, we have the arcade editor. Would you like to say anything about arcade? Oh, okay. I like to surprise attack Fred. I think this is one of his passion areas. So Arcade Editor is something that's used by Map Viewer, Scene Viewer, Dashboard, Data Pipelines, Velocity, are applications that are so that people can have an environment for writing Arcade. The whole environment for it is available inside this component. And so if you're creating an application where you want your end users to write Arcade to perhaps configure something in your app, you can use the Arcade Editor in your application. Kind of cool. Okay, so finally, and then we'll open it up for questions, is you might be wondering, what is the future of widgets? Many of you are building applications today that are using widgets, and now we're presenting this concept that we're all really excited about, the components, and so you might be wondering, okay, what's the future of widgets? Well, I think the writing's on the wall. We're very, very much invested in the web component direction. Eventually, widgets will be deprecated in favor of web components. We've done our best to provide an outline of how we see this happening, and you'll already see it with version 4.32. Once a component in the ArcGIS Maps SDK components package has been updated in their implementation to no longer wrap widget code. So our very first approach to creating the components was to wrap widgets in like a web component shell. And then the team's going, bit by bit, taking the components and basically refactoring them, making sure they're all based on Calcite and following all the, web component best practices to create components. Once that process has happened for the corresponding, or for that component, the corresponding widget is then deprecated. So I think we have 12 widgets that meet that criteria as of 4.32 that are now officially deprecated. I want to point out that deprecated doesn't mean retired or removed. Deprecated means, hey, everybody, there's a better implementation for that specific functionality. In the future, we will remove it. It's not immediate. So don't get too worried, because this is going to be a long process. We expect, or we're working towards, all widgets to be deprecated as early as Q1 2024, and then removed if all things go to plan.
27.
No,
24.
Oh, did I?
Yeah.
Last year?
Yeah.
That's okay. Maybe you guys all had a heart attack. Okay. 2026. That's our goal, Q1 2026.
Same time next year.
Same time next year. And then the following year is when we'd remove them. So you have 2 years from today. In the best case scenario for us, like the earliest would be 2 years from today where they'd actually be removed from the SDK. That doesn't mean wait 2 years to start your implementation. We're just trying to be as transparent as possible with our plan and to start learning about them now. You're at the right session to start that. One important point is that we will continue to make the component business logic available. So if you're writing applications that are taking advantage of view models today, because you're wanting to create some custom workflow, you will in the future be able to use the component business logic to do those custom things. We have a survey that I wanted to share with you. If you're using view models in your applications today, it would be really helpful for us if you take this survey and let us know what are you doing with the view models today. You might be, maybe something in the out-of-box widget or component doesn't have a particular tool you wanted to integrate. Well, that could be a future slot. Maybe you wanted to customize some aspect of the style. Well, that's something where we can add, something you can change with CSS. So the more you can share about what you're doing with view models, we can kind of help plan our future and our direction with how we're implementing widgets or components. Do you want to add anything to that, Jan?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to the blog post that Julie wrote actually on the transition to components. So it has all the information that she just explained, but in writing here. Yes.
Thank you, Jan. Okay, so I wanted to share just a couple resources. I showed you various things in the SDK that's related to components. The team's working really hard to move these different resources that we have available over to a component-based implementation that applies to tutorials, samples, getting started. You'll see all of that reflected in the SDK little by little. I highly recommend you read the programming patterns. Omar on the team did a really amazing job, maybe worked with others on writing the programming patterns for working with components. And then I wanted to plug the other sessions in this series. We worked hard to coordinate these 3 sessions together that build on each other. So this was the foundational core programming patterns. The next one, which I think is going to be really great, is all about using frameworks. So you saw all that work that Jan did with application state and all the architecture. The next session talks about, okay, well, what do frameworks do for you? When do you need to use frameworks? That whole question that many people are asking, like, do I need to use frameworks? All of that is covered in that next session. And then finally, the user experience. So we have some great presenters in that one as well. That one's going to cover like using Calcite with the components and different aspects. One of our core component developers is co-presenting with one of our core instant app developers. So it's a really great mix of guys covering that to learn about building your user experience. So I highly recommend that. And then finally, in the road ahead, we'll talk about, what is our transition? What's our goals? Where are we going with this stuff? You'll hear more about components in that session. Okay, I want to please ask you to share feedback. Did we hit the mark with this session? Are there other things you would have liked to learn about? Give us your feedback. If you want us to do this session again, let us know that. Yeah, we really appreciate it. And so with that, I will open it up for questions. Or do you have some you already wanted to point out? Or okay, anybody want to? You're on the back.
Yeah, we are missing some documentation about this, but we are going to push for a documentation update to get this more. It's kind of hidden.
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. The question was about like $ArcGIS to where it is. So
you could find it here. There is in this. It's referenced once.
Yes, but it's just like it's not very we're gonna put that more, more. We're gonna use it more also in samples and provide more documentation about this. Yeah.
Can you import more than one module at a time using
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Import an array.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Just one module as a string or an array of modules.
Any other questions in front?
Shape of the objects that are emitted by our components, like ArcGIS V-Ray shape. How do you know what object is emitted?
Yeah, I'll go to that.
Shape of the event. So the event, the way we approach this is normally the component should carry property and attributes. So the event usually doesn't have a lot of a payload. We just simply emit the event. And basically, the component should be used as its state at that moment to read whatever has changed. If some events contain really a result that is not going to stay around, or it's really a single event moment, like a click or something like this, then it will have the normal payload. So yes, it's documented on the reference page of the JavaScript API. Under components, if you go, there is different. There is different sections, and yes, the documentation can be improved greatly.
So if you look at it. We're working on improving it, but what you can do is look at the event name, and that will reflect the similar name that you can see on the widget today. If you don't find enough doc here, a lot of the time we are linking over. It looks like in this case we didn't yet get to it.
Is it possible to add your examples to a GitHub page or samples page?
Yes.
So the question is, can we get Jan's samples somewhere?
I think he wanted mine.
I'll show mine. So if you go on my GitHub, so YCABON, then my main project is called Presentations, where I have
many goodies.
Many presentations over all the Dev Summits and UC. And then in the Dev Summit 2025, you have what I just showed. And then a link to the app that is live.
Yeah, right here.
So one of the big advantages, I think, of the old style widgets is the ability to actually override the CSS to get custom style tracking the widgets. And I think that gets a lot harder when you're using like components where everything's calculated inside the shadow DOM, and to override those styles, you explicitly have CSS variables to override that. What sort of thought is going into expanding the ability to add custom styles to the components as time goes on? Is that a conversation with you?
Yes. So yes, the question is, how can I customize the styling of WebGIS components over time? Do we have a conversation? Do we have a discussion on this? Yes, we have conversation. So all our web components are based on CASite. So every design token from CASite are automatically available. And over time, as people will feedback, about what extensibility point they are missing on our components, we will expose eventually some additional CSS variables specific to the component itself or not. So this is coming along the way.
That's something you can put in the survey, by the way.
Yeah, that's something.
That's another thing you can tell us.
But yes, there is a conversation. But the future in the direction of web component is clear. Extensibility point, it's you gain something with the encapsulation. We don't pollute the rest of the system. Everything is well self-contained. But the price to pay is now that you have a clear boundary. So this clear boundary is good and bad, depending how you look at it. For me, it's a better system over time to have clear encapsulations of code.
Yeah, and really it's like we need to know about it. So what you are doing, we need to know about it so that we can take it into consideration. Otherwise,
send us requirements, please.
Yeah.
What's the best way, maybe after the survey is wrapped up, to continue to...
The number one best way is through tech support if you have access, because we actually look at, combining requests, like, oh, looks like 14 customers are asking for this, we should prioritize it. There's also ArcGIS ideas on the community. We look at that as well. So those are probably my top two recommendations for that.
And phrase well, map SDK for JavaScript. That's really the keywords and components will help us even further.
I think we have time for one more question. Over here, no? Over there? Anybody? Was there any good questions online you wanted to share?
a few questions online that have been answered. One, everybody was asking for your code, guys, so they can further dig in. That will be a good thing. The question of the CAD site design system, just to explain, there was one question online that is, okay, so you guys are forcing us to use CAD site. And the answer is no, we are not forcing you to use CAD site. You can use an additional, or for your application, another design system. It's just that our components are based with CAD site, and we will import CAD site to make our components works. Now, what we have seen customers doing successfully is through the CSS variable, there is a little effort to do to actually now make sure CAD site looks like the other system. We had to do this in a different scenario for us, but...
What other system? You mean like another design system?
Yes, another design system, like...
a material or something?
Materials, here we go. Material was the case, in that case, that was used. So for material, make the things look like material. But this is our components look the way, for sure, they look based on CAD site. So that was one of the questions.
And it's the same, like the tokens could be on the map components, or they could be also on the CAD site components, right?
So you place them usually in the root and they will penetrate the whole system. Another question quickly, that's very specific from the elevation profile. It was mentioned that the statistics from the elevation profile could be accessed, retrieved.
Yes.
The question was, can the theory behind the statistic also be retrieved for further calculations?
Can what?
The elevation profile.
Oh, that's the chart? Series, the chart?
So if you want to go there, Jan. And the other question were about the $ArcGIS, and we also answered the $ArcGIS. So documentation coming. Another question. Yes. So we support, so the types, the typings automatically come for TypeScript typings, but we also have typings for React, React 19, and for all the, what was the other one? Ember, and we also have for Stencil historically. So that is supported. For React 18, we have additional package that provide wrappers so that, React 18 was not really web component friendly, so we make it just enough for React 18. That's another good recommendation. Please move to React 19 as soon as you can. Thank you.
And then down, it's in our main guide under developer tooling. You can find the information about TypeScript.
Another question.
Go to so the question is, are we going to get the AI assistant coding piece? Go to the web development showcase, and they're actually running a usability study for that project that's in motion.
Are we going to have it? It's another question that we don't have yet an answer.
I can quickly talk about, it doesn't look like the component, the elevation profile component gives you access to the chart, but if you need to get like elevation along a line, you can use the elevation sampler. So the elevation sampler is available on the ground. You call the elevation sampler with the extent of your map, and then you can query elevation by passing a geometry. And so if it's a point, it will give you the geometry back with the z value, and if it's a polyline, you're gonna get like the z values along the vertices. And then this elevation sampler, you can change the extent. It will fetch the tiles from the elevation service, and then you can work on it client side. It's really fast. That's.
Are we done? Or
Any more questions?
Yes, there is 3 more questions.
Okay, go ahead.
How can we use custom base map in map components? So.
Okay. So the way
Yeah.
the way you do it is basically you don't specify the base map when you're defining the component. You just create the map, and then in JavaScript you can create your base map the way you've always done it, using the base map class, and then you can assign it to the map. I actually have some code examples of that I can pull up. Well, we can go to the next question. We'll
Yeah.
look for.
So Julie is going to see if she can pull out some code for this. Is it possible? Is it possible to use component and customize component in ArcGIS dashboard? So that's question came many times about applications. Applications themselves use our WebGIS components. So we are building all these components actually for us, primarily initially. That was for map viewer, scene viewer, dashboards, instant apps, and so on. We are building this WebGIS component. That's our way for us to harmonize, create coherent user experience, reusable things, basically do more with less. And so now dashboard itself is not an extensible application. It's an application that is configurable and has some extensibility point with Arcade for data and so on. But there is no plan at this point to make dashboards an extensible application with custom for that. For that, I would recommend either that you use Experience Builder or you, Experience Builder will be probably the best path at this point for, but that will be the developer edition of Experience Builder that you will have to download, install, and create your own widgets and user experience inside Experience Builder. That would be my best answer at this point. Where is the survey? That's another question.
Which survey?
They're asking for the survey online.
Oh, okay.
You can answer that later.
I think it's closed already, the
closed.
stream.
Yeah.
All right, I think we'll call it. And whoever asked about base, oh, that was online.
Yeah, no.
Well, they can't hear us right now anyway. So if you want to know that, come up afterwards. Otherwise, hey, come back for the what's new. And thank you guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.